She cried alone in church until the man who broke her walked back in. Have you ever sat in a pew and felt like your heart was the only sound in the room? That was Stella tonight. Eyes red, hands shaking until the doors creaked and Liam, the man who left her shattered, stepped inside. What do you do when the past walks into the sanctuary that was supposed to heal you? When the apology you needed never came, and yet grace whispers, stay. This is a story about a love that failed and a God who never does. About wounds we hid, prayers we stopped praying, and the moment heaven interrupts an ordinary service to rewrite two lives. If you've ever been overlooked, betrayed, or left with a promise that never became a future, this is for you. Stay with me until the end, because what begins with tears in the back row won't end there. Somewhere between confession and courage, between a single hymn and a second chance, hearts will learn to speak again. Comment where you're watching from and tell me, do you believe grace can rebuild what pride destroyed? Don't blink. What happens at the altar might just change everything.
The church was almost empty when Stella entered, the echo of her heels fading against the marble floor. Candlelight flickered along the stained glass windows, painting her face with soft blues and golds. She sat in the last pew, clutching a small, wrinkled letter she could never bring herself to throw away. The air smelled of incense and rain. Her heart still beat to the rhythm of a name she tried to forget, Liam. Outside, thunder rolled like distant grief. Inside, the choir practiced a hymn she once loved but now could barely listen to without breaking. Her eyes lifted toward the cross, and for the first time in months, she whispered, God, if you're still here, teach me how to let go. The words trembled out of her like confession, fragile and unsteady, but real. It had been 2 years since Liam left, 2 years since promises turned into silence and plans into empty pages. She had spent months pretending she was fine, serving at the community kitchen, smiling for others, building walls taller than her faith. But tonight, under the quiet of sacred light, the truth pressed in. She wasn't healed. She was surviving. Her tears fell before she could stop them, landing on the open Bible she carried everywhere. The verse blurred, but she remembered it by heart. He heals the brokenhearted and binds up their wounds. She wanted to believe it. She really did. Yet all she could feel was the echo of doors closing, of his voice fading into a memory she couldn't silence. Somewhere near the front, an old organ began to play softly. The melody wrapped around her like a memory, one Liam used to hum when they still dreamed together about forever. She wiped her face quickly, ashamed of the tears, ashamed that one song could still undo her. I'm supposed to be over this, she whispered. I'm supposed to be stronger now. The sound of footsteps startled her. The doors at the back creaked open, letting in a gust of cold evening air. She didn't turn around at first. Plenty of people came and went to pray. But then something in her chest shifted, the way you recognize a voice before it's spoken. Her hands froze around the Bible. The footsteps slowed, familiar, hesitant, real. Stella's pulse quickened as the air thickened with memory. Slowly she turned, and there he was, Liam, standing at the threshold of the same church where they once promised to keep faith through every season. His hair was shorter, his eyes older, but it was him. For a moment, time itself forgot how to move. He didn't step forward right away. He just stood there staring at her like someone seeing sunlight after too many storms. His lips parted as if to speak, then stopped. The silence between them roared louder than any sermon. 2 years of what-ifs hung between pews that had heard too many prayers and too few answers. Stella's instinct was to run, to protect what was left of her peace, but her body wouldn't obey. She gripped the edge of the pew, whispering under her breath, "Not again, Lord. Please, not again." Yet deep inside, another voice answered softly, "Maybe this time isn't about breaking. Maybe it's about rebuilding." Liam took a hesitant step inside. The door closed behind him with a quiet click that felt like destiny locking in place. He looked thinner, the sharp confidence she remembered now softened by something else. Maybe regret, maybe grace. He didn't come closer, just nodded once, a silent acknowledgement of all the pain between them. "Stella." His voice was low, hoarse, uncertain. It was the first time she'd heard it since the day he walked away. The sound hit her like a wave, half comfort, half wound. She looked away, unable to trust her own heart. "Why now?" she asked quietly. "Why here?" Her words trembled, not with anger, but with exhaustion. Liam took a breath that seemed to cost him everything. "Because this was where I lost my way," he said, eyes glancing toward the altar. "And maybe it's the only place I can find it again." His confession wasn't rehearsed. It spilled out like something he'd carried too long. "I didn't come for forgiveness. I came because I can't keep pretending God's done with me." The words hung between them, raw and human. Stella's throat tightened. She wanted to scream, to tell him forgiveness wasn't that simple. But she also wanted to ask if he'd really meant it when he said he still prayed for her every night before he disappeared. Instead, she whispered, "You don't get to walk back into a prayer you abandoned." He nodded slowly, accepting the truth like a man who knew he deserved worse. "You're right," Liam said, "but maybe grace does." That sentence broke something in her, a wall she'd built brick by brick to keep pain out. She turned toward the cross again, heart trembling. "God, what are you doing?" she thought. A gust of wind pushed through the windows, making the candles flicker wildly. It felt like the room itself was listening. Liam walked down one aisle, not too close, but close enough that she could hear the rhythm of his breath. "I never stopped praying for you," he said softly, "even when I didn't deserve to say your name in the same sentence as hers." Her eyes widened. Hers. The wound she had buried resurfaced instantly, the betrayal she had forgiven in words, but not in feeling. She looked up, eyes fierce through the tears. "Don't," she said, "don't say her name in this place." Liam's jaw tensed. "I'm not here to defend myself. I'm here because I finally understand what I broke." "You think understanding fixes it?" she asked, cracking. "It doesn't unmake the nights I beg God to erase your face from my mind." Liam's eyes filled with something close to shame. "I know," he whispered, "but I came to tell you he didn't erase it, because he never meant to. He meant to redeem it." Those words hit her harder than any apology could. Redeem it. She wanted to believe redemption was possible, not just for him, but for the part of herself that still loved him despite everything. The organ kept playing softly, like the soundtrack of grace refusing to give up. For the first time, Stella felt the air shift, not like an ending, but like the beginning of something fragile and holy. She didn't forgive him, not yet, but she didn't walk away either. Maybe some prayers don't need to be spoken out loud. Maybe they just need to be witnessed. Liam stepped back, giving her space. "I'll come back tomorrow," he said quietly. Not to talk, just to listen. She didn't answer, but when he left, she didn't cry this time. The silence that followed didn't hurt. It healed. Outside, the storm finally broke, but inside the church, peace began to whisper its first word.
The night felt heavier when Stella stepped outside the church. Rain washed down the stone steps, as if heaven itself was trying to clean the past away. She clutched her coat tighter, whispering, "Why now, Lord? Why bring him back when I finally learned how to breathe without him?" The city lights blurred through her tears, and somewhere in the distance, a bell rang midnight. At home, her small apartment was filled with quiet reminders of the woman she'd become since Liam left.
Devotional books by the bed, unpaid bills on the table, a half-finished painting of the church she once loved. She sat on the couch, hugging her knees, the echo of his voice replaying like a prayer she didn't want to hear. "I didn't come for forgiveness. I came because I can't keep pretending God's done with me." Those words haunted her. Why did they sound less like manipulation and more like truth? She'd seen that look before, not in the man who broke her, but in someone who'd finally met his own reflection and didn't like what he saw. Stella turned on the lamp and opened her Bible, desperate for direction. Her eyes fell on Isaiah 43. "Do not remember the former things. Behold, I am doing a new thing." She closed it quickly, shaking her head. "No, God, not that verse, not about him." But grace, once spoken, doesn't unring itself. Sleep didn't come easily. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the moment Liam had walked out, the slammed door, the message that never came, the silence that screamed. And yet, behind every painful flashback, there was something new. His voice trembling in that church, his eyes filled with regret. It didn't erase the past, but it complicated it. The next morning, the sun crept through her window like mercy she didn't ask for. Stella poured herself coffee, her hands still unsteady. She told herself she wouldn't go back to the church, that she had nothing left to say. But somewhere between the first sip and the last, she caught herself wondering if he'd really return to just listen. The thought frustrated her. She wasn't supposed to care, yet curiosity has a way of sounding like hope in disguise. She threw on her coat, muttering, "Just for a few minutes. I'll pray and leave before he shows up." But heaven smiled, because some prayers are answered in the spaces we try to avoid. The church was empty again when she arrived, except for one shadow near the altar. Liam, kneeling, head bowed, no words, just silence thick enough to feel. She froze at the back, watching as he stayed there, unmoving, a man carved by guilt and grace at the same time. For a second, she forgot how to breathe. He didn't see her, he didn't perform, he was simply there. And for the first time, Stella realized how long it had been since she'd seen a man pray like that. Not for show, but for survival. She turned to leave quietly, but then his whisper carried through the stillness. "God, if she can't forgive me, help me love her anyway." The words hit her like lightning. She wanted to run, but her feet stayed planted. Tears welled again, not from pain this time, but from something unfamiliar. Recognition. Maybe the same God who'd seen her cry alone was now watching him break in the same place where he once caused the wound. Liam finally lifted his head and saw her. He didn't move closer. He said, "I didn't think you'd come," softly. Stella crossed her arms, fighting to keep her voice steady. "Neither did I." There was no anger in her tone, only exhaustion. The kind that comes after years of trying to forget what still matters. He stood, unsure what to do with his hands. "You asked me once what faith meant to me. I said it was a feeling. I was wrong. It's surrender, and I've been too proud to do it." Stella wanted to roll her eyes, to say he'd always been good with words, but there was no performance in his voice, only truth. "You're saying all the right things, Liam," she said quietly, "but you said them before, too." He nodded, taking the hit without defense. "I know. That's why I'm not asking you to believe me. I'm asking you to watch what I do next." His tone was steady, but his eyes betrayed a plea. She didn't know what scared her more, that he'd changed or that he hadn't. "And what are you going to do?" she asked. He hesitated, then looked toward the old piano by the pulpit. "The same thing I stopped doing the day I walked away. Serve." His words lingered, simple but disarming. The church's caretaker entered, breaking the tension with a nod. "We're short on volunteers for the food drive this weekend." Liam turned to him and replied without hesitation, "I'll be here." Stella blinked in disbelief. He hadn't volunteered in years, not since before everything fell apart. As the caretaker walked away, Stella crossed her arms tighter. "You think serving fixes the past?" she asked. Liam's expression softened. "No," he said, "but maybe it's where healing starts." The answer silenced her, not because it was perfect, but because it felt right, the kind of right that still hurts. The choir began rehearsing in the distance, voices rising with the words, "Amazing Grace." The melody wrapped around them like a memory of everything they once were and everything they could be again. Stella tried to speak, but her voice broke, so she whispered instead, "Don't make promises you can't keep." Liam smiled sadly. "I'm not here to make promises, I'm here to keep one." She frowned, confused. "Which one?" He met her gaze. "That I'd never stop praying for you." And suddenly, the air between them wasn't just heavy, it was sacred. Stella stepped back, afraid of believing again. But as she turned to leave, she caught sight of the same verse on the wall she'd read the night before. "Behold, I am doing a new thing." Her breath caught. Maybe this wasn't coincidence. Maybe this was grace circling back. Outside, the clouds began to part, sunlight spilling through the stained glass like a silent promise. Stella walked out without looking back, but in her heart, something had already shifted. Hope had returned quietly, and with it, a question that would keep the audience holding their breath. Could redemption really start where heartbreak once ended?
Saturday morning dawned quiet and cold, but the church was alive with motion. Volunteers bustled between boxes of canned food, laughter echoing under high ceilings. Stella arrived early, telling herself she was only there to help the community, but deep down, she knew she wanted to see if Liam would actually show up. She wore a simple gray sweater and tied her hair back, her face still reflecting the sleepless night. Every car that passed made her heart twitch. "He's not coming," she thought. "Of course not." Then, as if on cue, the sound of footsteps filled the doorway, slow, steady, familiar. She didn't have to look to know. Liam had come. He looked different this time, not like the confident man from her past, but like someone rebuilding from ashes. A soft humility traced his features. "Morning," he said, voice quiet. Stella nodded, pretending to focus on sorting boxes. "Morning," she replied, her tone distant but trembling at the edges. They worked side by side without speaking for a long time. The only sounds were the crinkle of packaging and the echo of hymns from the old radio in the corner. Every time their hands brushed while reaching for the same box, something unspoken passed between them. Not romance, not yet, but something sacred, like memory learning to breathe again. When the pastor arrived, he smiled warmly. "Good to see you both here," he said. Stella returned the smile politely. Liam lowered his head in quiet respect. "It's been a while," the pastor added. "Grace has a strange way of bringing us back, doesn't it?" Liam nodded, eyes glistening. "It really does." The hours passed quickly. By noon, the sun filtered through the stained glass windows, painting them in colors of mercy. The last family received their box of food, and Stella stayed behind to clean. Liam carried the last few crates to the storage room, glancing at her with cautious gratitude. "Thank you for not leaving," he said. She looked up sharply. "I didn't stay for you." He smiled faintly. "I know, but thank you anyway." His voice wasn't flirtatious, it was reverent, like speaking in holy ground. For a moment, Stella didn't know if she was angrier at him or at herself for noticing the change in him. "People don't change overnight, Liam." He leaned against the wall, wiping his hands. "You're right," he answered softly. "But sometimes when you finally stop running, God starts changing you faster than you thought possible." Stella froze. He said it so simply. No grand gestures, no excuses, just truth.
"And what exactly are you running from now?" she asked. He looked down at his hands. Pride, regret, the version of me that thought love was a transaction instead of a covenant. The words sank deep into her. It was as if he'd spent those lost years learning the language of repentance. Stella crossed her arms, trying to hold back the tears. "I prayed for you," she admitted quietly. "Not for this, just for God to deal with you however he needed to." Liam nodded, a faint smile breaking through. "He did," he said. "He broke me, and then showed me you were the reason he still believed I could be redeemed." That line hit her like a confession she wasn't ready for. She turned away, gripping the edge of the table. "Don't say that," she whispered. "Don't turn this into another story where you get to look like the hero." Liam stepped back, hurt flashing across his eyes. "You're right," he said softly. "You're the one who stayed when I walked away. You were the hero all along." The air shifted. The radio switched to a hymn, "Come Thou Fount of Every Blessing." Stella's chest tightened. The same song had played on the night he proposed, the same night he disappeared the next morning without a word. Now, hearing it again, felt like standing in a memory God refused for her to rewrite. Liam noticed her trembling. "I didn't plan that," he said. She laughed bitterly. "You didn't plan a lot of things, Liam." Her sarcasm cracked mid-sentence, breaking into quiet sobs. He hesitated for a moment, then stepped closer, not to touch her, but to stand near enough that she could feel the steadiness of his presence. "I'm not here to erase your pain," he said gently. "I'm here to carry some of it if you'll let me." The words felt heavier than promises. Stella turned, her face streaked with tears. "And if I can't?" she asked. He smiled faintly. "Then I'll wait." That's what grace does. It waits. Silence followed, thick and sacred. Outside, children laughed as they chased each other through the courtyard, their joy cutting through the tension like sunlight through fog. Stella wiped her tears, whispering almost to herself, "Maybe grace has a sound after all." Liam looked at her. "What does it sound like?" She glanced toward the open door where the laughter echoed. "It sounds like second chances, like prayers answered in whispers instead of miracles." Liam's eyes softened. "Then maybe grace sounds like your name, Stella." The line lingered between them like a heartbeat neither wanted to end. She turned away quickly, pretending to gather papers. "Don't say things like that," she said. "Words build expectations." He replied, "Then let my actions build proof." Her breath caught. This wasn't the Liam she'd known. This was a man who had lost his pride and found purpose, and that terrified her more than his betrayal ever had. As she left the church that afternoon, Stella felt torn between two truths: the safety of pain she understood and the risk of hope she didn't. The camera would linger on her face, half lit by sunlight through the window, a symbol of the heart caught between past and possibility. From inside, Liam watched her leave, whispering under his breath, "God, help me love her right this time." The echo of his prayer filled the empty room like incense. He didn't chase after her. He didn't need to. Some redemptions are quieter. They begin with staying still. That night, Stella couldn't sleep. Her heart replayed every word, every look, and somewhere between exhaustion and surrender, she prayed again, not for him, not for answers, but for peace. What she didn't know was that tomorrow, peace would come, but not in the way she expected.
Sunday morning came cloaked in golden light, but Stella felt no peace. She stood before her mirror, buttoning her blouse with trembling hands. Every reflection looked composed, but inside she was a storm, a woman torn between anger and mercy. "You don't owe him anything," she told herself, yet her heart whispered, "But what if God does?" When she arrived at the church, Liam was already there, setting up chairs for the service. He didn't see her at first. His movements were slow, deliberate, like someone rediscovering purpose in the smallest of tasks. For a moment, she just watched, the way his shoulders curved under the morning light, the quiet humility in his every gesture. The pastor greeted her with a smile. "Good to have you, Stella. I was going to ask if you could help with the reading today." She hesitated. Of course, she said softly. Her voice wavered. The verse chosen was Romans 8:28, and we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love him. The irony didn't escape her. As the service began, the church filled with the sound of worship, voices rising, hearts reaching. Stella tried to focus on the words of the hymn, but every line seemed to circle back to forgiveness. When her turn came, she stepped to the front, reading aloud while Liam sat quietly in the back row, his eyes fixed not on her, but on the cross above her. Her voice trembled as she spoke the verse. She could feel the weight of it pressing on her chest. When she finished, silence lingered before the pastor's sermon began, a message about reconciliation. Sometimes, he said, God allows separation not to end a story, but to rewrite it. The words hit like an arrow neither of them could dodge. Stella's fingers tightened around the Bible. She didn't dare look back, but she could feel Liam's gaze like gravity. The sermon ended, people stood, and the choir began another song. But she remained seated, paralyzed by emotion she'd buried for years. Then she felt a gentle tap on her shoulder. "Can we talk?" Liam's voice was low, reverent. She turned slowly, eyes guarded. "Not here." He nodded. "Then after," he said, stepping aside. His restraint unsettled her more than his presence ever had. This wasn't the same man who once demanded attention. This was a man learning to listen. When the service ended, they walked outside. The courtyard was bathed in sunlight, children playing nearby, laughter echoing through the walls. They stood apart, a few feet between them, close enough to feel the tension, far enough to pretend it wasn't there. "Say what you came to say," she told him. He took a breath. "I came to confess, not to convince." She frowned. "You already confessed, Liam. You left, you lied, you chose someone else." His eyes filled with regret. "No," he said. "I confessed what I did, not why." That word why hung in the air like thunder waiting to break. "Then tell me," she said. "Tell me why you walked away from everything we built." He hesitated, the truth heavy on his tongue. "Because I didn't believe I deserved the kind of love you gave. You saw grace in me when I only saw greed. I thought leaving would protect you from who I really was." She blinked, taken aback. "So you broke me to save me?" she said, bitterness slicing through her voice. "That's not protection, Liam. That's pride dressed as sacrifice." He nodded, his face tightening with shame. "I know. I see that now. But back then, I mistook fear for wisdom." "And what about her?" she asked quietly, the unspoken wound resurfacing. "Was that fear too?" He closed his eyes. "That was emptiness. I thought comfort could feel conviction. It didn't. It only made the silence louder." Stella turned away, tears blurring her sight. "Do you have any idea what it cost me to forgive you in prayer?" He took a step closer, his voice breaking. "Maybe that's why I'm here. Not to ask you for forgiveness, but to learn what it means." She looked at him, startled. "What do you mean?" Liam's voice softened. "Forgiveness isn't just about being pardoned. It's about being changed by mercy. And I'm still learning." Stella's throat tightened. "You don't get to use God as a redemption story, Liam. He's not your excuse." His expression grew pained. "He's not," he replied. "He's my only chance." That line cracked something inside her. Not because it was perfect, but because it was true. They stood in silence for a long time. The sound of wind through the trees filled the space between them. "I don't know if I can ever see you the same way again," she whispered. "Then don't," he said. "See me as someone being remade, not replaced." His humility disarmed her defenses faster than apologies ever could. "You know what hurts most?" she asked softly. "That part of me still wants to believe you."
He met her gaze, tears gathering in his eyes. "Then let that part breathe," he said. "Don't kill it just to prove you're strong." The line lingered like a sermon, tender, sharp, unforgettable. A church bell rang in the distance, breaking the moment. People began leaving, their laughter fading into the hum of the afternoon. Stella turned away, her heart split between fury and faith. "I can't promise anything," she said finally. "I'm not asking you to," Liam replied. "Just don't close the door he opened." She started to walk away, but stopped halfway down the path. "Liam!" she called softly. He turned, expectant. "If you really mean what you said, show it where it cost you something." Her tone wasn't angry. It was a challenge wrapped in grace. His eyes met hers with quiet resolve. "I intend to," he said. As she disappeared around the corner, Liam stayed in the courtyard, hands trembling. He looked up at the church steeple, sunlight breaking through clouds, and whispered, "Lord, don't let me waste this second chance." The words carried like incense, rising with a promise heaven intended to keep. That night, Stella couldn't stop replaying his face, not the man who broke her, but the one still trying to rebuild. Somewhere between memory and faith, a truth began to root. Forgiveness wasn't weakness, it was warfare. And this battle had only just begun.
Monday came with a chill that refused to lift. Stella arrived early at the hospital, where she volunteered twice a week, hoping the routine would drown out the noise inside her. But even as she smiled at patients and handed out meals, Liam's words replayed like a refrain she couldn't escape. "See me as someone being remade, not replaced." By mid-afternoon, she stepped outside for air. The wind carried the scent of rain and city dust. She closed her eyes, praying softly. "Lord, if this is you working, help me recognize it. And if it's not, help me let go." But when she opened her eyes, the first thing she saw was Liam's car parked across the street. He wasn't there to talk. He was delivering supplies for the hospital's community program, quietly, without drawing attention. She watched as he lifted heavy boxes, exchanged a smile with a nurse, and drove away. Something in her chest loosened. Maybe this was what repentance looked like when words weren't enough. That evening, while Stella prepared dinner, her phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. She hesitated before opening it. "Stella, it's Clara. I know I'm the last person you want to hear from, but please, can we talk?" Her hands went cold. Clara, the woman who'd stood between her and Liam, the one whose name had once shattered her peace. For a moment, the world tilted. She set the phone down as if it were burning. Why now? Why would she reach out after all this time? But curiosity, or perhaps divine testing, has a way of calling when you least want to answer. Stella typed back 3 hesitant words. "What do you need?" The reply came quickly. "It's about Liam, and it's not what you think." Stella's breath caught. Every instinct told her to ignore it, but her heart knew better. Sometimes God lets the past knock twice, not to reopen wounds, but to prove they've finally healed. The next afternoon, they met at a small cafe near the church. The air between them was heavy with history. Clara looked different, older, tired, her confidence dimmed by something deeper than regret. "Thank you for coming," she said softly. Stella folded her hands. "Say what you need to say." Clara took a deep breath. "Liam and I ended things long ago. I don't expect you to care, but I needed to tell you the truth about how it happened." Stella's expression stayed still, but her pulse thundered. "Why?" she asked. Clara's eyes filled with tears. "Because you deserve to know he didn't betray you the way you think." Stella frowned. "What are you talking about?" Clara looked down. "When he left you,
It wasn't for me. It was for a debt his father left behind, one that could have destroyed him and everyone tied to his name. I didn't know until afterward. By the time I realized, he was gone." The cafe fell silent. The truth rippled through Stella like lightning, painful, illuminating, real. "So you're saying he sacrificed everything to protect others?" Clara nodded. "Including you. He told me once that you were the only person who ever saw him as more than his last name." Stella's throat tightened. "Why tell me this now?" Clara's voice broke. "Because I see him changing, and I wanted you to know that the man he's becoming, he's been fighting for that since the day he walked away." She stood up slowly, her eyes wet. "I just hope it's not too late for either of you." After Clara left, Stella remained at the table, numb. Her coffee had gone cold, her thoughts a storm. "All those nights I begged God for justice, and all this time he was already working on redemption." The realization both comforted and terrified her. That night, she walked back to the church. It was empty again, the candles flickering low. She knelt in the same pew where she'd cried alone weeks earlier. "Lord, if this is your story, not mine, help me surrender the pen." Her tears fell softly, but this time they felt different, cleansing, not desperate. The door creaked open. She didn't need to look. She already knew. Liam stepped in quietly, carrying a box of donations. When he saw her, he froze. "I didn't mean to interrupt." "You didn't," she replied, voice calm. "You just walked into the middle of a prayer you started years ago." He smiled gently, setting the box down. "Then maybe it's time we finish it." His tone was steady, reverent. Stella studied him carefully, the lines on his face, the way humility had softened his eyes. "I talked to Clara," she said. His shoulders tensed instantly, but she lifted her hand. "Don't worry, she told me everything." Liam's breath hitched. "Everything?" She nodded. "About your father's debt, about the silence you carried so no one else would pay the price." His eyes glistened. "I didn't want your pity." Stella shook her head. "It's not pity, Liam. It's perspective. You were protecting people while I thought you were just leaving." He looked down, voice trembling. "It doesn't make it right." "No," she said softly, "but it makes it real." She stepped closer, the air between them charged with grace and memory. "Do you think we can ever start again?" he asked quietly. Stella hesitated. "I don't know, but maybe. We can start over with God first, and let Him decide the rest." He smiled faintly, the kind that breaks before it heals. "Then that's what I'll pray for," he said. Stella nodded, tears falling freely now. "Just make sure this time your prayers don't end with words." He exhaled deeply, understanding. "They won't. They'll end with change." As he left, Stella remained by the altar, whispering the verse she once avoided. "Behold, I am doing a new thing." The camera would linger on her face, hope trembling, faith awakening, as the narration fades with a question that keeps the audience hooked. What happens when grace brings back everything you thought was gone for good?
By Thursday morning, the town was whispering again. Rumors spread faster than mercy ever could. Someone had posted an article online. Former CEO's hidden scandal, the debt that destroyed a legacy. Liam's name was in the headline. His past, once buried beneath silence and prayer, was now displayed for everyone to see. Stella saw the headline while scrolling through her phone at the cafe near the church. Her heart sank. The comments were cruel, people judging, mocking, twisting half-truths into daggers. She put the phone face down, whispering, "Lord, please not now." But maybe grace doesn't protect us from storms. Maybe it meets us inside them. Across town, Liam sat in his car, hands gripping the steering wheel. He hadn't planned to hide. He told himself he'd face whatever came with humility, but the weight of humiliation still cut deep. His phone buzzed endlessly. Reporters, old colleagues, people pretending to care. But the only message he wanted was from Stella. Hours passed before he saw her name light up his screen. "Are you okay?" He stared at the words for a long moment before typing back, "I'm not sure, but maybe I should have been honest sooner." Her reply came quickly, "Meet me at the church, now." When he arrived, the sanctuary was empty except for her. She stood near the front pew, arms crossed, her expression unreadable. "I told you the past would cost you something. I didn't realize the price would be this public." He exhaled sharply. "Neither did I, but maybe this is what truth feels like, heavy but freeing." She looked at him for a long time, searching for the arrogance she used to know. It wasn't there, just exhaustion and surrender. "You could disappear again," she said softly. "No one would blame you." He met her eyes. "But God didn't pull me out of the dark just to make me run back into it." The words hit her hard, not because they were rehearsed, but because they carried conviction. "Then what are you going to do?" she asked. "Face it," he said, "not as the man I was, but as the man grace is still building." Stella wanted to look away, but she couldn't. Something about the quiet in his voice felt like worship. The church door opened suddenly. The pastor entered, holding a folded newspaper. "Liam, I read it. Half it's lies, half is truth, but all of it is opportunity." Liam frowned. "Opportunity?" The pastor smiled gently. "Opportunity for God to show people what redemption looks like when it stands in public light instead of hiding in shame." The words stirred something deep in Stella. Maybe this wasn't a setback. Maybe it was the altar God had chosen to prove what restoration really meant. She turned to Liam. "Then let's not hide. Let's do something the world doesn't expect from people who've been broken. Let's serve anyway." That Sunday, the church was full. More people than usual. Some curious, others judgmental. The news had spread, and everyone wanted to see the man behind the scandal. Stella stood beside the donation tables, her heart pounding. Liam entered quietly, carrying boxes again. The whispers began immediately. "That's him," someone murmured. Another voice hissed, "I can't believe she's letting him back here." Stella heard every word, but didn't flinch. Instead, she whispered, "Lord, let my grace be louder than their gossip." Liam's hands trembled as he set the boxes down. The weight wasn't from the crates, it was from the eyes watching him. Shame has a sound. It's the hush that follows a whisper. But before he could lose his resolve, Stella stepped forward. "We all know pain," she said, her voice rising over the murmurs. "Grace doesn't choose the deserving, it chooses the willing. And if you came here today expecting to see a man's downfall, I hope you stay long enough to witness his redemption." The pastor stepped up beside her, nodding approvingly. "Amen." Liam's eyes filled with tears he couldn't hide. For the first time, he didn't feel like a fraud standing in church. He felt like a sinner finally allowed to stay. The moment glowed, raw, real, and drenched in mercy. After the service, a few people approached him quietly. Some to shake his hand, others to simply nod. One older woman placed a hand on his arm. "My son made mistakes too," she said. "You remind me that God still works with broken clay." Her words struck deeper than any sermon. Outside, Stella waited for him. The sun was beginning to set, streaking the sky in orange and violet. "She did well," she said. He shook his head. "You did. You stood beside me when you didn't have to." She smiled faintly. "Standing beside you isn't forgiveness, Liam. It's faith on trial." He nodded, understanding. "Then I'll keep showing up for the hearing." Her laugh broke through the heaviness. "Careful," she said. "Grace has a way of making you live what you joke about." He smiled back. "Then maybe that's the kind of sentence I can live with." For the first time, the tension between them felt lighter, like chains quietly loosening. As they walked through the courtyard, the sound of children's laughter echoed again, just as it had the day Hope first returned. Stella paused, watching the light dance through the trees. "You ever wonder why God brings people back?" she asked. Liam thought for a moment. "Maybe because he never stopped waiting where we left him." She looked at him, her eyes soft but cautious. "Just remember, grace isn't a second chance to repeat the past. It's a new beginning to live differently." He nodded. "Then I'll live like a man forgiven, not excused." That night, as Stella sat by her window, she saw her reflection framed by moonlight. For the first time in years, her tears weren't from sorrow, they were from surrender. The story was no longer about the man who broke her heart. It was about the God who was teaching them both how to rebuild it.
By the next week, the air around Stella felt heavier. People at the church had started whispering again, not about Liam this time, but about her. The woman who forgave too quickly, the one who didn't learn her lesson. Each smile she gave was returned with polite distance, and each act of kindness was measured against the gossip that followed her home. At the grocery store, she overheard two women from her Bible group. "It's sweet that she still believes he's changed," one said. "Naive, maybe," the other replied. Stella froze in the next aisle, pretending to read a label. Her throat burned, but she stayed silent. Forgiveness was easy to talk about in sermons, harder to live when it cost your reputation. That night, she sat by the window, journal open, pen unmoving. "Lord, I wanted to walk in grace, not stumble through it." Tears dotted the page. Why does doing the right thing hurt so much? But in the stillness that followed, she felt it, that soft nudge in her spirit. Because real grace always costs something. Across town, Liam faced his own storm. The scandal had died down, but not the isolation. Business partners had distanced themselves. Old friends stopped answering calls. Yet for the first time in years, he wasn't chasing approval. He was learning peace in the ruins. Every night, he prayed the same prayer, "God, make me trustworthy again." One evening, he stopped by the church to drop off donations. Stella was there, cleaning the pews. She didn't notice him at first. He hesitated, then spoke softly. "You shouldn't have to fight my battles for me." She looked up, exhausted but calm. "I'm not fighting for you, Liam. I'm fighting to remember who I am and who I serve." Her honesty caught him off guard. "And who is that?" he asked gently. "The God who forgave me long before I knew how to forgive anyone else," she said. The words settled between them, heavy with truth. He smiled faintly. "Then maybe we serve the same one." They worked together in silence for a while. The scent of old wood and candle wax filled the air. As Stella wiped down the altar, Liam knelt to gather hymnals. Every small act of humility from him felt like a verse written in motion, not spoken, but lived. "Do you ever regret believing again?" Liam asked quietly. Stella paused. "Every day," she said honestly. "But regret isn't the same as doubt.
Regret is human. Faith is choosing to stay anyway. He nodded, absorbing the weight of her words like prayer. Later that night, she received a message from the pastor. "Some members are concerned about your involvement with Liam. I think it's best if we discuss it after Sunday service." Stella stared at the screen, her stomach twisting. Concerned. The word felt like a verdict disguised as care. When Sunday arrived, the church was full again. The sermon was about compassion, but the atmosphere felt cold. After the benediction, the pastor approached her gently. "You know I admire your heart, but not everyone understands your choices. Some think it sends the wrong message." She swallowed hard. "And what message is that?" He hesitated. "That grace has no boundaries, that forgiveness means forgetting." Her eyes filled with quiet fire. "Then maybe we've been preaching grace too cheaply, because the kind that saved me didn't come without blood." The pastor's expression softened, but he said nothing. Stella walked out before he could answer. The congregation watched as she passed, whispers rising like static. Outside, Liam was waiting near the steps. He could read everything in her eyes. "They're questioning you, aren't they?" he asked. "They're questioning everything. And maybe they're right. Maybe I'm wrong for believing again." He shook his head. "No, you're just brave enough to do it out loud." Her lips trembled, but she smiled faintly. Bravery feels a lot like brokenness these days. A gust of wind swept through the courtyard, scattering leaves at their feet. Liam looked toward the cross atop the church. "He knew what I realized," he said. "People can doubt our redemption all they want. It won't stop God from finishing what He started." Stella blinked, her voice barely a whisper. "Do you really believe that?" "I have to," he said. "Otherwise, all of this was for nothing." His eyes met hers with quiet conviction. For a moment, the noise of the world fell away. It was two people standing under grace, wounded, misunderstood, but still standing. That evening, Stella found herself in the same pew where it all began. She looked up at the stained glass, remembering the night she'd cried alone. Now, she wasn't crying, she was breathing. "Lord, thank you for trusting me with a story I didn't want to tell." Outside, Liam lingered near the church door. He didn't enter, not tonight. Instead, he looked up at the light spilling through the window where she sat. He knew her silhouette by heart. "She's still praying for me," he murmured. Maybe that's what love looks like when it finally matures. Prayer instead of possession. Inside, Stella opened her Bible to a verse she'd underlined long ago. "Let us not grow weary in doing good, for in due season we shall reap if we do not give up." She smiled faintly, tears tracing her cheeks. "I'm not giving up. Not on grace. Not yet." The final shot would linger on her hand resting over her heart, the light from the stained glass reflecting over the open Bible, symbolizing faith enduring through criticism, love tested by truth, and a woman learning that grace sometimes means walking alone for a while. And as the narrator's voice fades, one final question echoes for the audience. What if the hardest part of forgiveness isn't letting go of the past, but holding on to grace when no one else understands it?
It had been 2 weeks since the storm of rumors quieted. The town moved on to new stories, new distractions. But inside the church, something different was happening. Not noise, but rebirth. The walls that once echoed judgment now carried the soft hum of restoration. And on a quiet Friday evening, Stella stood at the altar again, waiting. She didn't know if Liam would come. Part of her hoped he wouldn't, afraid of what his presence might stir. The other part, the one shaped by faith, knew he would. Love, when reborn through grace, always keeps its promises, even the ones never spoken aloud. The candles flickered as the door opened. Liam entered slowly, holding a small wooden box in his hands. He looked different now, not just humbled, but whole. "You came," Stella said quietly. He nodded. "You asked me to show my faith,
where it costs me something. I think I finally understand what that means." He walked to the altar and placed the box down gently. "What's inside?" she asked. He smiled faintly. Everything I was still holding on to. Papers, letters, the last reminders of who I was before God found me again. I thought I needed to protect it all, but I don't anymore. Stella's eyes softened. "Are you letting it go?" He nodded. "Not to forget, to make room." His voice cracked, because grace doesn't erase the past, it redefines it. The sentence hung in the air like prayer. She stepped closer, her eyes shimmering with tears. "Then maybe it's time we both let go." They stood together in silence. The air smelled of candle wax and rain, the same scent from the night they first saw each other again. Stella took his hand gently and placed it over the Bible resting on the altar. Whatever this becomes, it belongs to him first. Liam's voice trembled. "That's all I ever wanted." He closed his eyes and for the first time in years prayed out loud. "God, thank you for the pain that became my teacher, for the woman who saw grace before I did, and for the chance to begin again, not with pride, but with purpose." Stella whispered, "Amen," tears falling freely now. The moment didn't feel like romance, it felt like resurrection. Two people who had broken each other, now standing in the same place where God had broken them open for healing. The church lights dimmed as thunder rolled softly outside. Rain began tapping against the stained glass like divine applause. Stella laughed through her tears. "Even heaven cries happy tears," she said. Liam smiled. "Or maybe it just remembers where we started." She looked up, her heart steady for the first time. "I used to think love meant never being hurt. Now I know love is staying when it hurts, and trusting that grace can still make something beautiful out of it." He nodded, voice low. "Then maybe love begins where mercy ends." The phrase lingered, powerful and quiet. Stella repeated it under her breath. "Where mercy ends and love begins." It felt like prophecy, like the ending heaven had been writing long before either of them understood the story. Outside, the streets glistened with rain, the church bells tolling softly in the distance. Liam reached for her hand, not to claim it, but to honor it. "I don't know what comes next," he said, "but whatever it is, I'll walk it differently this time. Slower, humbler, honest." Stella smiled. "Then you won't walk it alone." Their fingers intertwined, not as lovers rekindled by nostalgia, but as two souls rebuilt by grace. It wasn't a fairy tale ending. It was something better. Truth wrapped in tenderness. Weeks later, they began working together at the community center the church had been trying to restore. Stella taught art to children from broken homes. Liam handled logistics quietly, always in the background. It wasn't glamorous, it was healing. Every brushstroke, every prayer, another step toward redemption. One evening, as the children painted, Stella looked up and saw Liam fixing a broken window. Light from the setting sun poured through the glass, illuminating the dust between them like tiny stars. In that moment, she realized forgiveness had done what revenge never could. It had made her free. The pastor visited that night, smiling as he watched them. "You two remind me of something," he said, "that grace isn't just a gift to receive, it's a story to live, every day." Stella nodded, tears brimming, and sometimes, she said, it takes breaking to remember who the author is. Months passed, and the town slowly forgot the scandal, but the people who stayed close saw something different. Two lives transformed, not by perfection, but by persistence, the kind of faith that stays when it has every reason to leave. On a quiet evening, Stella returned to the church alone. She lit a single candle, whispering, "Thank you, Lord, for turning heartbreak into harvest." Behind her, footsteps echoed. Liam entered, smiling softly. "I thought I'd find you here." She turned, her eyes glowing in the candlelight. "You always do," she said. He walked closer, but not too close. "Not to take you back," he said. just to walk beside you forward. Her lips curved into a trembling smile. Then let's walk. As they stepped out together into the night rain, the narration closes softly. Some stories don't end with "I love you." They end with "I forgive you." Because forgiveness is love in its purest form. And when mercy ends, that's exactly where love begins. If this story touched your heart, don't leave without sharing it. Comment below where you're watching from and tell us, do you believe God can rebuild what pride once destroyed? Subscribe to Redeemed Hearts for more stories of faith, forgiveness, and second chances. Because every heart deserves redemption, and every scar can still become a testimony.